Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Bonsort of Radio Retro Future, and welcome to another edition of Rambling Writer's Diaries, where I talk about writing processes and my thoughts on it. And today I want to talk about journals in stories. This was due to a question that I got in my recent fiction writing workshop for beginners. That was the second one I did, and I am planning to do another one in January, and this is kind of like in the framework of my Association of Ishtar project, in which the final assignment is to write a story for the Association of Ishtar. And one of the things that is often used in those stories are journals. So now, however, there seems to be a misunderstanding what journals do. You see, journals are not a genre of stories. They are a framing device. They are a tool in that regard, a way to tell a story, not, a story genre into itself. It is often used as a way to kind of like people are working on a world and they want to quickly convey information, so they want to use the tell structure rather than a show structure. But this is a wrong approach to journals. You see, people think of journals as, it's a factual recording of events. However, narratively, that is not the case. You see, you write fiction to entertain people, and if people are interested in the ideas that you lay out there and the problems that you lay out there, well, that's a bonus. But as a writer, from my perspective, you are an entertainer first, and you write to be read. And for example, journals are often used as a kind of like travel guides, like, oh, a character is going from one location to the next and to the next and to the next and to the next. So it becomes a kind of a travel guide. However, here's the problem. First of all, readers are not obliged to care about your world. When you look at, the avid readers, the average avid reader, they consume like 50 books a year. And your story is just one more story in that pile. So they don't particularly care about your world. Not as much as you do, unless, that your story hits particular notes. And your world building in that regard is only as good as your writing. And if you use a journal as a kind of a travel guide to your world, here's the thing. Let's say I write a journal to an actual existing place. Let's say it's some village called Rotjeknoor, somewhere in the middle of Friesland in the Netherlands. Is that something you want to read? You probably never even heard of the town. It's fictional, of course. But, it's probably very interesting to the people who live there and whose family grown up there, and they probably also participated in the creation of this particular book, but it doesn't mean everybody cares. The market for that book is very, very small. That being, the 100 inhabitants of that particular village. And there's nothing particularly wrong with that, but you gotta realize there's just not much demand. And when you are a creative, you wanna be read. That means you need to make something that appeals to a large audience. And if that a particular portion of that large audience, loves your world and wants to know more, that's great. But let's take, for example, Star Wars. Sure, millions of people seen Star Wars. But let's say it's only 100,000 people, it's probably more, but for example, 100,000 people that really enjoy Star Wars and, they write the wikis and they produce more content and they write the fan fictions and buy all the merchandise. That's still, it's not, all the people who watch Star Wars are not all the people who buy the merchandise, etc. So the larger your appeal, the greater the amount of people that will actually care about your world. That being said, how does that relate to the journals? Well, very simple. You need to create a narrative, and the journals are not there. You cannot use journals and just state a number of facts like, oh, today we visited this town and, we bought this. In this town, we saw this and that. And oh, in this town, we saw the people, oh, live in squalor. Oh, terrible. No, no, no. You still need to have a narrative with a beginning, middle, and end. You still need to have a conflict. Um, Take, for example, historical diaries. Like, for example, there is this book called The Merchant of Prato, a 14th century merchant and multinational, actually. And they wrote a book based on all the letters and evidences and diaries and journals that he left behind. But the writers did not do that by just, oh, here is like every letter he ever wrote transcribed. No, they looked for a narrative that they could investigate. Let's say they had a chapter dedicated to his religious views. They had a chapter dedicated to, how he conducted business. He had a chapter dedicated to his best friend, for example, and how he interacted with him. So they looked for various narratives and they picked out the highlights and turned it into a kind of, well, I suppose you can call it a kind of linear story in each chapter. And that is basically what you have to do with the journals as well. If you want to have a good example of this, take the Fallout series by Bethesda, where you discover all these logs on the computers, and when you go day by day, you see like a kind of a chronological turn of events, but these chronological events still have a clear middle, a middle, beginning, and an end. So you see where it is going, and you are engrossed because I played Fallout 76, for instance, and I discovered logs by someone living in a place called Huntersville, where they tested a virus that turned people into super mutants. And every day you see like this town just deteriorating and deteriorating as all these people are changing and they start attacking each other, and then the person who writes the logs himself starts to change. And starts to panic, and you see like this degradation of this society in these logs. And that's how you use journals effectively. Take, well, for example, Lovecraft uses journals where, well, the Shadows over Innsmouth, where the character goes to Innsmouth and he hears all these stories about how the people are inbred and etc., etc., and then he goes there, and the town doesn't trust him, and they start hunting him, and then he finds out that he too is related to these people in Innsmouth, and then he too starts to degenerate into one of the Deep Ones. So there is a clear narrative over there, and that is one thing that you gotta realize when you work with journals. You cannot just start writing a journal and just go, oh, today we did this and today we did that, and just, and at the end, oh, we reached our destination. It's like, okay, nobody particularly cares about that. And I realize that, or I suspect a lot of aspiring writers try to use this as to like, oh, this is what the world looks like, and this is where this place is, and this is what the weather is, and unless that really matters in a larger context, in a narrative context, it's not very interesting to readers. And like I said, we consume a lot of media, we consume a lot of worlds, and from all those films and worlds, there are only a few worlds we'll care about. And this is also, what lore is. It's information that people are invested in, have a personal fond memory of. Let's say, the trials and tribulations of Skywalker. So, sure, you can use journals to tell your story, absolutely. However, you still need to create all the cues that a good story has, like good characters, character progression, a mystery, an interesting plot, a adventure. All those things still apply. What you're doing with a journal is basically, well, first of all, you're turning it into a first-person perspective. That is one thing. And often these journals, they record either a progression of a character into, well, often madness, because, it's a trope for, or the Lovecraftian genre for nothing. And what else do you say? Well, it's to record past events in an interesting way. That's why they work as flavor text. So, for example, you enter a vault in Fallout, let's Fallout 3 or 4, and you see all these refuges. There are all kinds of clues of what happened and what went wrong in this particular vault. Like skeletons are laid out in a particular way, for example. There are barricades everywhere. Whoa, what happened here? And then you find the logs, and then you read the story how this vault digressed into a state of anarchy. However, due to the visual storytelling, you are already made curious to, you want to know what happened here. So the people go in with a mystery like, something mysterious happened here, what is it? And then they found the journal, so it's a reward in that situation, and you need to take it into account. Like, why would readers be interested in reading this? So at the start of any journal, you need to set up a proper mystery, or a interesting point to leave off from, so the readers are curious what happens, and how things unfold. And so you must include, for example, heroic narratives, or a clear digression into madness, for example, as with Lovecraft. So yeah, I hope this was a useful thing. Of course, if you haven't already, please check out our other videos, like and subscribe and all that. And of course, go and check out, if you're interested in my own writing, go check out the Association of Ishtar wiki. And of course, the Association of Ishtar wiki is a kind of a role-playing set where people can either take on the role of a researcher who's compiling these entries, or the reader can take in the role as an investigator trying to figure out how all these entries are related to each other. So yeah, go check that out if you haven't already. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for watching, and as always, make things your way.